Hey everybody, my name is Abby. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I would assume that I'll get quite a few different viewers on this video. So normally on my channel, if this showed up in your subscription box and you're like, wait a minute, what is this? I normally do makeup type videos, and this year I've been focusing on saving money and paying off debt and things, and I wanted to include some Bible-based videos. I have done a few in the past, and they were kind of in a format that wasn't really easy for people to follow. I did just a voiceover kind of thing with like some text on the screen. Mostly it was just a black screen, which I guess I was just lazy and didn't do that. So I'm going to do like a face-to-face kind of video, and I'm hoping to learn how to do closed captions so that anybody that's hard of hearing or deaf can, or if you're eating chips or something, like that's why I use closed captions, you can follow along with these videos. So I am always open to suggestions for topics for these. I do have a few planned ahead, so I'm going to be out of town, so I'm going to pre-film a lot of stuff. And today is going to be about the Shunammite woman, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. But if you have any suggestions for other videos or topics, or like people in the Bible or anything that you want me to talk about, let me know. I'm not by any means a Bible scholar. I'm not a preacher or a minister or anything like that. I'm just an average person. So take this with a grain of salt, if you will. Go with me or anybody else that you listen to messages from. Use your own judgment about if they're full of it or not. I know a lot of people who do things like this aren't truthful, or they may take things out of context, so you have to do your own research to make sure that you're getting good information. So it's always a good idea to follow along with what they're saying and then read like the whole passage to get all the context. So just so you're aware, I'm not perfect. So I didn't grow up in like Bible school or Sunday school or stuff like that. So a lot of Bible stories are kind of new to me. So I feel like I've heard this story just a little bit before, but then I heard a message from Stephen Furtick at Elevation Church, which I will leave a link to their church below. They have some really amazing messages. They also do have I guess I'll link their church website and their YouTube channel, because they put all of their messages on the YouTube. But he talks a lot about the prophet Elisha from the Old Testament, and mostly in like 2 Kings. And the story is a lot related to Elisha, but it's kind of more about the woman. There are two parts to this story, so I'll talk about that also. And it's really interesting, and especially in the Old Testament, when you hear about a woman being talked about, because that was a different time, and that was the culture then, was that women were sadly looked on as less than. But there are quite a few stories in the Bible, especially once you get to like the New Testament, that it really women really had a voice. I'm going to be reading from my notes just so you're aware, I can stay on track. So the Shunammite woman's story starts in 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 8. And don't get confused like I did. The woman in verse 1 of 2 Kings 4 is not the same person. So like 2 Kings 4 starts out talking about one woman, and then it switches over in verse 8 to the Shunammite woman. So her story is important as well, but we're talking about the Shunammite woman. And her story doesn't end after this passage, so hold on to the end. Most studies and sermons that I've found stop at the end of this passage. I only heard one sermon, which was from Elevation Church, that included the second part, so I'll talk about that. Now, the other main player besides the Shunammite woman is the prophet Elisha. So just a background in case you aren't familiar with Elisha. He was the successor to the prophet Elijah, and he trained with him for many years until Elijah ascended to heaven, because God didn't want him to experience death, so Elijah just went up to heaven instead of having an earthly death. And then Elisha became the leader among the other prophets and was well known throughout Israel and Judah. This takes place in Shunem in northern Israel, about 15 miles from where Elisha lived. So that's where Shunammite comes from, is because she was from Shunem. That was like the main Google searched thing when I was looking up other stuff about this, was like, what does Shunammite mean? It just means that she's from Shunem. So I'm going to read this passage to you if you want to follow along. I have the NIV version of the Bible, but you can follow along in whatever translation that you have. Okay, so again, this is 2 Kings 4, verse 8. So one day Elisha went to Shunem, and a well-to-do woman was there who urged him to stay for a meal. So whenever he came by, he stopped there to eat. She told her husband, I know that this man who often comes our way is a holy man of God. Let's make a small room on the roof and put a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp for him. Then he can stay there whenever he comes to us. One day when Elisha came, he went up to his room and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite. He told her, oh wait, I can't read. One day when Elisha came, he came up to his room and lay down there. He said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite. So he called her, and she stood before him. Elisha said to him, tell her, you have gone to all this trouble for us. Now what can be done for you? Can we speak on your behalf to the king or to the commander of the army? She replied, I have a home among my own people. What can be done for her? Elisha asked. Gehazi, I can't say his name. Gehazi said, she has no son and her husband is old. Then Elisha said, call her. So he called her, and she stood in the doorway. About this time next year, Elisha said, you will hold a son in your arms. No, my lord, she objected. Please, man of God, don't mislead your servant. But the woman became pregnant, and the next year, about the same time, she gave birth to a son, just as Elisha told her. The child grew, and one day he went out to his father, who was with the reapers. Then he said to his father, my head, my head. His father told his servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him up, wow, I cannot. This has been a long time since I've read aloud from a book like this. I'm not in school anymore. So his father told a servant, carry him to his mother. After the servant had lifted him up and carried him to his mother, the boy sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. She went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, then shut the door and went out. She called her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and a donkey so that I can go to the man of God quickly and return. Why go to him today? He asked. It is not the new moon or the Sabbath. That's all right, she said. She saddled the donkey and said to her servant, lead on, don't slow down for me unless I tell you. So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. When he saw her in the distance, the man of God said to his servant Gehazi, look, there's the Shunammite. Run to meet her and ask her, are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is your child all right? Everything is all right, she said. When she reached the man of God at the mountain, she took hold of his feet. Gehazi came over to push her away, but the man of God said, leave her alone. She is in bitter distress, but the Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me why. Did I ask you for a son, my lord? She said, didn't I tell you, don't raise my hopes? Elisha said to Gehazi, tuck in your cloak to your belt, take my staff in your hand, and run. Don't greet anyone you meet, and if anyone greets you, do not answer. Lay my staff on the boy's face. But the child's mother said, as surely as the Lord lives, and as you live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. Gehazi went ahead and laid the staff on the boy's face, but there was no sound or response. So Gehazi went back to meet Elisha and told him the boy is not awakened. When Elisha reached the house, there was the boy lying dead on his couch. He went in, shut the door on the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. When he got on the bed and lay on the boy, mouth to mouth, eyes to eyes, hands to hands, as he stretched himself out on him, the boy's body grew warm. Elisha turned away and walked back and forth in the room, and then got on the bed and stretched out on him once more. The boy sneezed 7 times and opened his eyes. Elisha summoned Gehazi and said, call the Shunammite, and he did. And when she came, he said, take your son. She came in, fell at his feet, and bowed to the ground. Then she took her son and went out. So, to summarize, the Shunammite woman gave Elisha a place to stay while he was traveling. And I imagine that prophets would probably be pretty busy and traveling a lot. And he wants to repay her, but she doesn't want anything. But he finds out that she is barren and promises her a son by next year. She says, no, don't get my hopes up. But she has a son anyways, and the son possibly has an aneurysm or something that causes his head, and he died. And she didn't tell anyone, not even Elisha or her husband. But Elisha brought the son back to life. So number 1, I'm going to cut deep right off the bat. Serve the Lord without expecting anything in return. Elisha didn't ask her for food or the room. And says, verse 8, she urged him to eat some food. And she didn't come to him with a laundry list of things she needed or wanted. She even resisted the idea of having a son. We can fall into the trap that honestly I think the devil puts on us, that if we give to God, then we must receive a reward. And if we don't, we start doubting his presence and want to stop giving. Truth be told, giving to God isn't exactly giving it at all, because you can't give what wasn't yours to begin with. You're only returning it. So serve the Lord without expecting anything in return. Number 2, bring your struggles to God first. So once she realized that her son had died, she immediately hid him in Elisha's room. She told her husband to go get a servant and a donkey, and she was going to go see Elisha. And he was concerned because it was just a normal day, and I guess they only really saw him on holidays. So this was before we were able to have a personal relationship with God. So at this point in time, until Jesus came, God only communicated with people through the prophets. And she knew that since Elijah was a man of God and he gave her a son, that he would be able to do something. She didn't even really tell Elisha what happened, and God didn't tell him either. So when verse 27 it says, "She is in bitter distress, and the Lord has hidden it from me and not told me." So here's the thing. You're not living in the Old Testament, and neither are your friends, your followers on social media. They're not prophets. So bring your struggles to God first. And number 3, bear with me on this one, but number 3 is to trust that other people are part of God's plan. Yes, Elisha was a prophet, but put that aside for a second. God sends people to us to help us or to be a part of his plan. This is going to tie into the next part of the story. We often expect to pray to God and he'll just fix the problem. It just doesn't work like that, and as much as we want it to. That's actually why I believe modern medicine came to be, but I don't want to get sidetracked with other religions and whatnot. So trust that other people are part of God's plan. Now for the rest of the story. The tale of the Shunammite woman continues in chapter 8, verse 1. Again, still in 2 Kings. Follow along with me if you want. This is a little bit shorter passage, but... So now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Go away with your family and stay for a while wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last for 7 years." The woman proceeded to do as the man of God said. She and her family went away and stayed in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. At the end of the 7 years, she came back from the land of the Philistines and went to appeal to the king for her house and land. The king was talking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, and had said, "Tell me about all the great things Elisha has done." Just as Gehazi was telling the king about how Elisha had restored the dead to life, the woman whose son Elisha had brought back to life came to appeal to the king for her house and land. Gehazi said, "This is the woman, my lord the king, and this is her son whom Elisha restored to life." The king asked the woman about it, and she told him. Then he assigned an official to her case and said to him, "Give back everything that belonged to her, including all the income from her land from the day that she left the country until now." So to summarize this one, Elisha tells her and her family that there's going to be a famine in the land and that they need to leave for 7 years. And they come back after 7 years, and she goes to the king to get her house and her land back. And right at the same time as Elisha's servant is literally just telling the king about her and about the miracle, she walks in. So he restored her land and also repaid her interest because they collected the produce and everything from her land while she was gone. Thing number 4 that we can learn from her story is to read beyond the beloved Bible stories that we know. You need to get the whole story. So this happened with King David's story as well, and I'm sure many others. This is also a precaution about taking stories and verses out of context, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And number 5, the last one, is your tragedy might just become your miracle. If her son hadn't died and been raised from the dead, perhaps they would not have found favor with the king, or even they would not have known about the famine. That one, just think about that for a little bit. I know you can sit here and debate whether or not she would have been fine without it or whatever, but that saved her and her husband's life, and I'm sure like their servants and everybody, because that was normal back then for everybody to have a bunch of servants. So yeah, so if she hadn't had that relationship with Elisha, then they very well could have died in the famine, or not been very well off. So that's about it for this video. Let me know what you think. If you have any suggestions again for other topics, or let me know what you think about this story as well. And also let me know if you had heard the story of the Shunammite woman. Let me know if you had heard the second part or not. And I'm really interested in to see like how many people actually know that. So it's not a bad thing if you don't. It's just I'm curious because I didn't know it either. So yeah, give this video a thumbs up if you thought it was helpful, and that really helps me out a lot if you give it a thumbs up, and also commenting as well. It'll get this video out to other people who want to see it. So I will see you in the next video. Bye.